Hey, folks, this is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host. Today we have with us a brother who's been with us once before. He will, go to youtube.com, put in Book Talk with Corbin, and you'll find his the first interview we did with him. And I'm talking about Pastor Mike Singleton, and he's also a patriot and an author. He's going to talk to us today about the fact of creation. And he has that book available at biblesmack.blogspot.com. And he believes he still has the Facebook page, Bible Smack, still up. So you may want to check that out. But you really want to go to biblesmack.blogspot.com and to check out his book, something we're going to talk about today, The Fact of Creation. Brother?
Yeah.
Thank you again for.
Let me also add that this will be on the January 11th post. So January 11th, 2021. Mm-hmm. So just so people don't get lost in the weeds there. But basically, this is an interesting book because instead of trying to bring people to faith necessarily, it's actually just saying that this is a fact, that, there is a creator God and that God created the universe. And what I do with it is usually when you hear the debate over the existence of God, you hear, well, is God a reasonable proposition? And let me show you philosophy. Or let me show you science that there is evidence of a designer and argue about. And I have a little bit of that in my book. But really what this is about is that God is not a theory, okay? God is an observed fact. This is part of history. And one thing I noticed is I started getting involved with reading a lot of historians. And so some of the guys like Philo, Josephus, Archbishop James Ussher, and a host of others. I've got a little bit of Herodotus in there, but basically the idea is that if God is already observed, then you can really only argue, well, God is unreasonable or or even saying there's no evidence doesn't even make any sense because you have an observed fact. So that's kind of the biggest idea that the book is kind of showing here. Okay. And I'll give you, it's got 6 chapters. What I do in the blog is I've got links at the bottom of the blog that show all the chapters. So basically I say there's the experience of creation, which actually deals with political reality. Either there is a God who gave us common sense and we can argue morality from there, or man doesn't have common sense, so you have to have a giant government tyranny to set the rules and force man into a form of slavery. Mm-hmm. That is the basic experience of creation there. So we start off with the politics because people are more used to that. Then I make that historical case for the creator. Something interesting, I just looked up on Wikipedia. I found 36 among the tribes all over, the ancient tribes all over the world, 36 creator gods. All of them created the world. They're said to be male. They're often having a Garden of Eden of some sort, or also tales of the Great Flood. And so when you have all these groups kind of saying, okay, there was this one God that created everything. Now, of course, they don't go with a full Christian theology or Jewish theology or something like that. But once you get that testimony of everyone's experience from the past, then you have to say, well, okay, well, is there one of these that makes a little bit more sense? Well, at that point, we start looking at the Jewish record. We start looking at the flood of Noah, how the ark was seaworthy. And then we start getting into the Bible and creation. But what I do, I don't focus as much on interpreting the book of Genesis as I do looking at the historians, looking at Josephus' record of creation, looking at Philo's record of creation, looking at things the Talmud said. I even go with not only the Bible. Of course, in my religion, we don't recognize the Apocrypha, but I go with the Apocrypha. I look a little bit at the Quran and just show all these different levels of everyone on a uniform basis understanding a creator God. So now that we have that history, the next step is it rational? And there's an argument for the existence of God called the ontological argument. Now, I'll give you like a little street version of the argument so that we can kind of get a good gist of it. And that is that if you don't understand, let's see here, God by definition exists. And if you don't understand that, then you're arguing the wrong God. And so here's some simple things, okay? God is either real, or he's a myth, or he is impossible. So I'll ask you, Corbin, God is all-powerful. Is a myth all-powerful?
No, because he's not real.
Yeah. God is eternal. Is a myth eternal?
No.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
God
It can be eternal.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. A myth can be eternal, can't it? Because
you can say everlasting, but it started at some point.
Okay, all right.
All right, and God is everywhere. Is a myth everywhere?
Wait a minute. Let me say this real quick.
Is a myth at all?
Yeah, let me say this real quick to my listeners. Guys, we're having some problems with on his side. He's going in and out, and there's some distortion and all. So please be patient. Listen very carefully to what the brother is saying. Of course, it's very important what he's saying. This is a great piece he's put out. You're going to find it on biblesmack.blogspot.com. So if you can't, if we go in and out, my editor is not going to be able to sort of clean up everything. But just hang in there and listen very carefully. Now, go ahead, brother.
Okay. So to put it simply, we look at all these qualities, and they're all omni-qualities. God's all-knowing. God's, holy. God is eternal. Mm-hmm. God is everywhere. So when you look at all these, they're the exact opposite of what a myth is. And therefore, God cannot logically be a myth, because a myth has nothing to do with the definition of God. Hmm. Now, there was a great mathematician several in the last century named Kurt Gödel. If you're deep into mathematics, but basically, before he died, he privately wrote out a mathematical equation proving the ontological argument that basically you have to go with these essential qualities to say that something is what it is. Hmm. And so basically, the only alternative they've argued is like, well, can God create a rock that is too heavy for him to lift? Hmm. And with that argument, basically, it's a malformed question. And the reason is because it's like asking, are you so strong that you're weak and so smart that you're stupid? Hmm. It doesn't keep with the logic. It doesn't keep with the definition. And if God's all knowing, of course, he created logic. So he knows logic. He, by definition, he should be able to sustain himself as he is. So that's the logical thing. Now, at that point, if we've got a historical observation and it's rational, then you really, you've got your evidence there. You've got your fact observed, and it is logical. The other chapters are really kind of deconstructing the atheist foundations. One of which, let's see here. Mm-hmm.
Now, brother,
did you say something, Corbin?
Yeah, brother. Let me ask you this. Obviously, you've put a lot of work into this, done a lot of research, and really, intellectually, it may be sort of new and fresh to people, but you've made it accessible. I think, in other words, people can understand it. But yeah, here's the question: why is it important? Why is this important if a God exists or doesn't exist, etc.?
Okay. Well, some of my first chapter is going to deal with that because all of our society is arranged this way. And so if you look at America's foundation, it goes back to the common law principles that started off in England, which were actually based on the Old Testament. And society had come to realize, even like Roman pagans like Cicero figured out that there is a common morality that we all have, and there has to be a judge or God who argues with that. And so we can have freedom because we all personally have a set of this divine morality. And yet, if there is none, then man is not free. Man cannot be responsible. Therefore, he's not independent. Therefore, he doesn't have freedom. So all of society is really hinging on this point. And this will be a direct attack upon atheism, but it doesn't stop at atheism, because the ideas of naturalism, evolution, all these philosophies that merge together, these things will be a anchor for other philosophies. So some New Age pagan philosophies and things that people go with, or deisms or whatever, all these things are hinged upon that. And so the whole way society works will then shift, like a boat is sank on one side and the other one raises up. And so that is a huge shift, a paradigm in your whole belief system.
Okay. So let me try to dig a little deeper into what you're saying. You talked about natural law, etc. So when we say we hold these truths to be self-evident, they are talking about a creator God that gives us rights, and therefore that creator God is the only one that can take away those rights, or am I getting this correct?
Correct. That morality does not depend on the government. And Thomas Jefferson, some of these other founding fathers, a lot of times are accused of deism. And that's, for some, that's totally wrong. And for some, it's only halfway right. Because the deists of that day believed in the moral superiority of the Bible, and they were big promoters of biblical religion and biblical morality. So that was the left. The left wing was saying, go biblical ethics. Okay. They were saying that biblical ethics somehow evolved or something. And so they all recognized that central morality that must be divinely given to us, that gives us the ability to be responsible, and therefore we can have a free society.
Okay. So it is important when we have some folks, politicians, public servants, whatever way you want to categorize them, we do need to pay attention if they start saying things like, well, hey, we're all about diversity and inclusiveness, so we need to stop making references to God so that we don't offend other people. We need to take prayer out of the public arena so that we don't offend other faiths. Should that cause us concern?
Yeah, well, the biggest problem is that there's no logic used. I believe in beauty. I believe in goodness. Well, God made beauty and goodness. It doesn't make any sense. It's relying upon your emotions to operate your logic is what they're doing. They want to give you words that we call triggering people, that give emotional thoughts instead of logical thoughts. And your emotions are a good thing, but they have to submit to logic. I think that's a basic lesson of society. And yet, it is being challenged now. We're in a point of chaos. And that is because we have a mind of chaos. They have trained people to think according to their emotion instead of thinking according to logic. And while, we don't have to be, Dr. Spock or anything, we still, have to, concede that logic is more definite than, was more accurate. Logic is more accurate than emotion. Emotions are waves that move back and forth, and sometimes they can cross the boundary, and that's where we can fall.
And you would say that, as someone with a biblical worldview, that the Bible is not in conflict with logic. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, and I would say that the logic of a man, you will say that there is a total logic, but the logic of a man, because we're not always logical, okay, is inferior to the logic of Scripture. And therefore, we need to submit our versions of logic sometimes to the Scripture. So, there are flaws in logic that we're seeing right now. This idea of fuzzy math, where numbers are not really thought of in concrete forms. These ideas that kind of put down, strict instructions of logic and understanding, that's dangerous. Also, some of the logic that we use for the secular worldview, like when we talk about an ancient primordial prehistory and, all this kind of evolution, Big Bang, what happens is we're doing what's called the logical fallacy of induction. And what that is that we don't actually have the evidence. In history, you have somebody back in the past. But in these forms, they start here and they just calculate backwards and they assume that the present is the key to the past. Yet that doesn't work quite as often as people think. Because you're making up, you're doing what we call ad hoc. You're adding in this idea that makes sense to you, but it doesn't mean that it was observed. So we don't know if it's true. We're just saying it makes sense and we add on. And so we have a lot of these facts that are not actually facts. They're just versions of imagination. You think about one of the great evolutionists of Germany, Ernest Haeckel. He used to make all sorts of drawings. He drew embryos, and he also they would draw intermediate species, but they were just cartoons that they made in their mind. So what's happening is that they're adding on, and so before you know it, you have a big myth, and the myth is constantly changing, changing the story and all that. But that's what goes on there. So I dealt with that too in some different places.
Fantastic. Folks, this is Matt Singleton.
Yeah.
He has written The Fact of Creation. You can get that at biblesmack.blogspot.com. It's very important. It's very important.
January the 11th.
January 11th. It's very important that you get this because, as you can see, even if you're not a Christian, if you're just an atheist or agnostic, you've got to understand that our rights as citizens of the United States of America are based on largely biblical thought, a biblical worldview. It's very important that we understand that no man, no government can take away our rights.
Yeah.
And you got to understand that. And what this man is communicating in this book is that, hey, it's perfectly logical. It makes sense. And once we sort of take that, if we're dealing with a three-legged stool and we take one of the legs away, and this is definitely one of the legs, that stool is going to fall. Yep. Right? That stool is going to fall. We got to read this. And not only read it, but I would say share it too. Brother, is this too heavy for, say like at the 7th grade level and up, or?
Let's see here. I would say that you're probably looking at high school to college. We'll start off there. Okay. It does deal with a lot of concepts that could go over your head. Some of them don't. And some of them, if you're just a good slow reader, slow reading is good. If you're a good slow reader, then you can carry through with most of the concepts. I don't know if I put a dictionary in, so that's where you got to look into that. But, I always tell people, go to 1828 Webster's Dictionary. It's online, and basically that dictionary is just very amazing. It has very biblical concepts in it, and it helps to understand our language as it originally was. A lot of our language has been altered to get the concept of God out of our language so it gets out of our thought process, which kind of goes along with what I've been saying.
And you're saying that was, what year was that again? 1828, Webster's Dictionary?
Yeah. Yeah. You can go on a search engine and put 1828 Webster's, Webster's Dictionary. I'm like doing it right now just to
Mm-hmm.
kind of see. And it's like a Webster's Dictionary 1828.com. And it will be amazing to see where these ideas really came from and how they really work.
And that's something I've
It's also good if you're if you got James Bond.
you have what?
Oh, one last thing, your Constitution. A lot of your constitutional words are all in the Webster's Dictionary there too. So it's a very good piece.
All right. All right. I was about to say, I deal a lot with young people, and I'm oftentimes surprised at how little to no knowledge whatsoever they have of the U.S. Constitution. Haven't read it. It's not taught in a lot of the schools. And then now we've got this critical race theory coming up, and it's been shoved down to, with teachers, and teachers are walking away and say, oh, that document offends me, it's racist, and all this other kind of stuff. But then, of course,
Ignorance is a force. This is a lesson I've learned the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. Darkness and ignorance is a substance and a force, as far as mentally anyway. And so, if you take away knowledge from people and then you give them another story, well, then that's the truth they think they have. Mm. And, if you tell people, be critical of this, especially when they're growing up, be critical of this, but don't be critical of that. Be critical of the Bible and America and our foundations, but don't be critical about any alternative, no matter how bad it is. Everybody's got a right except for this group. Right. And so we've gotten to that point. I think in the last 5 years, 10 years, that's where we finally reached to where they are taught to hate our values, the values of the taxpayer, really. And they're taught to hate those values, and they've got this new value to have. I've actually talked to people college age who told me they do not understand the the Constitution, and they've told me that America was founded upon slavery. That is two fundamental ideas. They here you take out the truth, you put in the lie, and then they're off. And I warned against the public school system back when they were doing Common Core, and I got in a national. They got 15 seconds in national news thing, and basically, sadly, it didn't. Of course, we didn't stop them then, but everything that I was scared of has happened.
Wow. Okay. Brother, we're going to end the conversation here, end the interview here. As always, you're very enlightening, giving us some great information. I want to encourage people again. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm sorry, people. This is very important. You got to go to biblesmack.blogspot.com. You got to read this. And then he told us to also check out 1828 Webster Dictionary, the 1828 Webster Dictionary. And in 3, I would urge you, after you've read it and going through it a couple of times, make some notes, etc., pass it on to a high school student, pass it on to a college student, and urge them to read it and to study it. Because I'm telling you, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I have not the least been interested in living in the type of situation we have in Venezuela, Cuba, or North Korea. I'm just not interested in it, period. Yeah. Brother, thank you so much. I will be in touch, okay?
All righty. God bless you, Corbin. I appreciate your show.
Thank you.